Well, my name's Nathan Kroll, and I work with Youth for Christ. I've been with them for 24 years. I actually met Mark Pomeroy about 20 years ago when Sync really started to unfold. I probably used it with 150 plus groups. What I find that's probably different about this material than any other material is the fact that it connects the dots for people. The neat thing is that people have been in church their whole life really think that they have a grasp or an understanding of it. But when they go through this, even though it's short, they get to the end and they say, I didn't realize that, or I didn't know how it all fit together. I've led campus life groups for years, and I had one group where I had some students that were coming to my campus life group, and there was a group of them that were atheists. And so we would play all the games and do all the stuff, and then when it came time to talk about the Bible, they would usually say, well, we don't believe in the Bible, and they'd get up and leave. Well, one time I asked them, I said, you guys don't understand the Bible. Would it help you if we would sit down, just your group and myself, and I would kind of take you through an overview of the Bible so that you could have a better, grounds to argue it? And they said, you'd do that for us? And it's like, well, yeah, that would give you just a better foundation to know what you're arguing, since you don't believe in God. So we started with 6, and we went through the sync process, and at about lesson 4, or stage 4, one of the students dropped out, but the other 5 stayed, and by the time we got to the end, 4 of the 5 that were remaining actually accepted Christ, because when we got into the end of it, it was like that connected the dots for them. And they said, there's no way that this could be just random. And I said, exactly it. So the way that it works in people's lives is the fact that things that they know, what it does is it connects all those pieces together. All the information that they've had about Old Testament or New Testament, or where do they fit or how do they fit, really what this does is it just pulls it all together for them so that they can see that there was a plan from the start that God had for them.
Hi, I'm Brian Marine. I am the associate pastor at Mosaic in Lincoln, and we recently used Sync as a part of a leadership development program that we're running at Mosaic called Protege. And we used it because we wanted a way to teach our students about the Old Testament so they could see the bigger story that God has going on through the Bible. And I knew when it came time to develop the overall curriculum for Protege that I wanted that to be a piece of it. And I knew that Sync could be a good option for covering that piece of what I wanted them to go through. And I knew that because I had gone through it several years ago. I worked for a YFC here in Lincoln. And under the leadership of Nathan Kroll, he had taken a bunch of us through the Sync program. And for me, it was a huge eye-opener. I grew up in the church. In fact, my dad was a pastor even. And so I grew up, I knew all of the stories that were included in the Sync program. I knew them all like the back of my hand in some ways, but I'd never seen them laid out in such a clear, unifying story as how Sync does. And so it was the first time in my life I saw that these weren't just some kind of random stories that happened to be in a book called the Bible, but that God was telling one story of redemption through the entire thing. And it was really, being a part of that class just took my Bible knowledge to another level, took my own understanding of Jesus and what he came to do to another level, and just took my understanding of how God is working through history to another level. And so for me, again, when it came time to develop this program where I was going to be developing young leaders, I knew that needed to be a part of their experience as well, because it was such a huge part of my development as a young leader.
I think the thing that's most unique about Sync is just how it focuses on big picture. I've been a part of Old Testament studies in the past. I went to elementary school and middle school to private school, and it was very concerned about the specifics, the little things in past studies. My private schooling seemed to be really focused about nitpicky little facts and little things that were really difficult for me to put the whole picture and the whole story of the Old Testament together. But I think that what's really unique about Sync and about the program and the syllabus of Sync is that it's focused on the big picture and just giving you an overarching theme of what God and the Old Testament are all about. And it really is shaped up to be more like a story instead of just a bunch of individual and random little happenings. I think that the way that Sync's really impacted me is just showing me the context and the story and everything that led up to Jesus. I obviously, as a Christian, knew that Jesus was important and that his coming to earth was significant. But I think through Sync and through Sync study, it really showed me why that was so significant. It gave context and story and purpose to everything leading up to Jesus and his time and his ministry. It gave context to that and showed just why exactly his coming to earth and his time and his ministry on earth was so important.
The really cool thing for me about Sync is that I hadn't really done any Old Testament studies before, so like it was a nice intro to it and overall summation of what the Old Testament is about. I think the really neat thing that it highlighted, at least for me, is it showed how much of a game changer Jesus coming onto the scene was, and like how things were different before and after that. So it was really cool because a lot of the stuff that I had talked about and explored previous to that was New Testament stuff, after Jesus has come on the scene or during Jesus's time here, showing us what it means to do ministry with other people. So it was really neat to see how things were before that and how they changed after it. It helped me realize more, I think, that Jesus was a huge deal. Not that I didn't know it before, but it highlighted the fact that he really changed the way that we interact with God as people and made it a lot more accessible for everybody to just feel loved and feel the grace and care of God.